Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Cat's Track. Thank you for subscribing, liking, and sharing this with your friends. Today's episode is with our friend, Caroline Saunders. Caroline is a British diplomat and has been the British Consul General in Calgary since May 2016. She is the senior UK government representative for all three of our prairie provinces. She is due to complete her diplomatic assignment here in June this year after an exciting 5 years. Caroline is in Calgary with her husband, Rod, and adult daughter, Susie, who has Down syndrome. She's loved being in Alberta, as she's very much loving being an outdoors person, loving hiking and discovering as much of Canada as possible. Caroline tells me that her daughter has had a fantastic time in Calgary and has developed into quite an artist with the support of her disability arts group, Indefinite Arts. They will be taking home a new art collection as well as lots of very happy memories and warm friendships. We will miss you, Caroline. Friends, thank you so much for joining us, and you will find her full bio attached. Caroline, thanks for joining us today.
No, my pleasure. And it's great to be your first interviewee of 2021. I'm honored.
Yes. and I'm sorry you only see my mug shot there. It's internet issues. Here we go.
Yeah, well, there we are. We work around it, right?
That's right. We always find a way, don't we? Are you ready for the questions that we sent you, Caroline?
Yeah, far away.
Excellent. Okay, well, the first one being, what's been your greatest challenge over the last several months, almost a year?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for all of us, it has to be COVID, and it's affected us, each of us in different ways, and some have had better experience than others. In the UK at the moment, it's a particularly challenging situation. The new variant COVID has caused quite a spike in cases, but thank goodness now we have a number of vaccines that are being rolled out, and we have an accelerated vaccination program. But nonetheless, it's very challenging, and we'll have a few more months before we can start to get back to normal. So I think that's been challenging. And then my second challenge over the last year in my role has been Brexit. You know, it's never been off the front page of the news in the UK, as the UK has had to agree a new trading agreement with the EU. And thank goodness that was agreed on Christmas Eve. It went to the wire. And then the British Parliament had to reconvene on the 30th of December to pass the legislation in time for the new deal to be law for the end of the transition period. It's a bit complicated, but the point is we were trying to deliver normality for trade and business between the EU and the UK, and of course between the UK and Canada. And Canada is one of the biggest investors in the UK and very valued investor. And so a lot of my role in my time here, really since the Brexit referendum, but particularly in the last year, has been reassuring Canadian investors that the UK economy is sound and to have confidence in that. And I'm pleased to say that Canadian investors have been positive about the UK environment. So we have a very good trading relationship. And I think the sense is that we can grow that now with a new trade agreement between the UK and Canada.
I think you can. A lot of my friends are actually considering moving there and or have already done that.
Oh, excellent. Well, I have to say that, I mean, in terms of the tech scene, it's red hot in the UK. It's been long been one of the main, or one of the world's leading tech locations, a huge depth of talent. And of course, that alongside the City of London, there's a huge depth of capital and venture capital for investment. So it has remained, even during COVID, a real sort of hotspot for growth, and a lot of Canadian investment in what's happening.
I bet. May I ask a question about, well, two questions. What sort of incentive does the government give for bringing new companies there, one? And then number two, are there tax advantages for companies that are moving, and why the UK versus the Cayman Islands?
Well, we are a low tax regime within Europe. We're one of the lowest tax in terms of corporation tax, one of the lowest tax locations in Europe. In terms of incentives, we do have in my office, in my team, I have staff that can help Canadian companies that want to invest and locate in the UK, and we provide free services to allow them to do that. So there's different incentives for R&D, tax credits, and so forth. But if people are interested, that's one of the roles of my team is to provide that service in the same way that the new, Invest Alberta Corporation does the same for people that want to invest in Alberta. So that's, it's a really important part of business going forward to foster investment in both directions. So I think one of the things coming out of COVID has been the realization that we need to ensure resilience in our supply chains and not be dependent on exactly one supplier for important goods and services. So I think we will see more of a diversification of supply chain, and that will lead to opportunities.
Very exciting. Excellent, Caroline. And what about the 3 things that you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of them rotate around COVID, of course, since it's been such a big feature of our lives in the last year. And I'd say that as a diplomat, and I spent my whole career as a diplomat in various parts of the world, but COVID has really brought home to me the importance of international collaboration in dealing, obviously it's a global pandemic, and we have to deal with it internationally. And we've seen unprecedented cooperation between the UK and Canada on, say, PPE, the early stages, PPE supply, the development of treatments and vaccines, working together on the Gavi fund to provide vaccines for those in more disadvantaged parts of the world. Because if we're going to address this pandemic, we have to make sure that there's resilience across the world and immunity across the world. So supplying vaccines to those who are the most vulnerable, wherever they are in the world, is really important. So I think Canada and the UK have stepped up to fund things like that. But the relationship between the UK and Canada is very close. It always has been. But the collaboration on COVID and other things that have happened this year has moved it to a new level, and it's been really gratifying to see. And I'm very optimistic about what we can achieve together in the world.
I'm with you. I love collaboration in all things.
Yeah. So that's lesson 1. I think the second one has been the impacts on business. When we look at COVID, of course, there's been devastating impacts on many companies and many sectors, and that's true in Canada and in the UK. But we have seen some companies, some sectors that have benefited from that, have seen a huge reward, and companies that have pivoted to take advantage of new opportunity. And I think what that shows us is that business disruption can be frightening, but it is a big opportunity. And we see that in Alberta, there's the dependency on oil and gas has caused issues here, as we know. And if you take that 1 year of COVID, where we are so far, it's a sort of illustration of what is happening over a longer timescale in terms of the sort of low carbon transition. And I think we'll see that COVID will accelerate that low carbon transition. And in a sense, Alberta's in the eye of the storm, if you like, if it's a longer storm drawn out over a longer period. But I've been interested to see how many Albertan companies are seeing that now as an opportunity. And I talk to people a lot about what's happening in the UK, where Prime Minister Johnson has announced a whole raft of measures where we want to align recovery with sustainable development and future growth, because the sort of investment governments are going to have to make to recover from COVID are once in a generation investment cycles. And so we have to tick as many boxes as we make those investments as we can. And certainly now from a UK point of view, we want to go all in on, our Prime Minister's calling it a green industrial revolution. It really is hugely ambitious. Things like bringing forward by 10 years the phase out of petrol and diesel vehicles, huge investment in hydrogen and carbon capture and storage, as is planned in Alberta, looking at the decarbonisation of whole industrial areas, creating new types of jobs, huge investment in building retrofit to improve insulation in homes and commercial and public buildings. A really ambitious agenda. He's calling it his 10-point plan for the green industrial revolution. And I'm finding a lot of interest in that. here in different parts of Canada, and particularly in Alberta and the prairies, to look at that. Are there things we can do together? Because I think that will lead to more opportunity between the UK and Canada. And it is challenging. It is challenging, and it's going to take decades to do it. But we're starting on it in a big way. We're being ambitious, and we'd like to sort of travel on that journey with Canada. And I think that's a huge opportunity. As I say, I think COVID has increased the speed of that transition. So that's my second thing coming out of COVID.
Love it.
And I think the third thing is on mental health. I know a lot of us are worried about that. And particularly in the UK, as we've gone into now our third major lockdown period, there are huge concerns about the long-term impacts on short and long-term impacts on mental health. And I put alongside that the impacts on mental health of social media. And we saw in the US yesterday, how potent social media can be in impacting people's emotions. So when I was young, I trained as a first aider. I think a lot of us did at school and so on. And the thought that you can help people if they fall over and cut themselves or do something worse. And since I've been in Canada, I've trained as a mental health first aider and taken that. It's been really interesting to think about what does that mean in identifying when people are starting to get into difficulty and how can we help them? There's three key things about mental health. One is your underlying mental health and resilience. Secondly, the stress and pressure that you might be under. And third, the releases that you have to de-stress. And if those things need to be in balance, the underlying resilience, the pressure and the de-pressure, if those things aren't in balance, then you start to lead to difficulty and even to sort of mental illness. And so I do worry about those long-term impacts, and that we do need to invest more in public mental health services in the same way as we'll need to invest more in physical health services to have overall well-being in society, to get people back to work and to being productive. Because if we don't do that, it's going to affect productivity as well. And I think managing alongside that the impacts of social media, and I mean, I think the problem with social media is the algorithms are designed to identify subgroups and groups to feed off extreme views and sort of partition people into those chambers, those echo chambers, where it's almost as if it's incitement of passion and reaction is stimulated. And so, when we think about how do we turn that off, we can't turn it off. I mean, we've seen today how Twitter and Facebook have turned off Trump's account for a period of time. But generally, we can't turn that off. It's something that's a feature of society, that it can impact on democracy and so on, and on mental health. So we have to then develop a culture with our children and generally of using social media properly, with courtesy and with respect for each other and in moderation, because it is a potent tool. But I think we can't uninvent it. So we have to learn to use it in a respectful way. And I think I do fear for what would happen if we aren't sensible about its use. So I hope those things aren't too negative. Three
no,
things.
not at all, Caroline. In fact, I'd like to jump on and chat a little bit about the social media piece. I agree with you. It's similar to anything that was once new to a human race, right? So when money was first invented, or I guess it was first on the scene, we had to learn how to manage money. And very similar to social media, no one's been taught on how to use social media. Certainly common sense is in some, but not in the same way as others. Some would say that is common sense. So having some sort of, I guess, benchmark and understanding, or general understanding of what social media can do, what powerful tool it can be, and the positive, negative impact that it can have. Having training and all that, I think, is really important. We've all just been learning as we go along, and that's not healthy. I think it's really important for us to all understand, and at young ages, let's get it into the schools so that the kids will understand the impact that they're making.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important thing that we just should teach proper use in the schools and teach sort of the rules about it, because I think you're right. We haven't been the best role models. If we look at even our leaders, their use of social media has not been setting a good example, and has not been a good role model. So we have to do better at that. And I say we can't uninvent it, and it will develop. But yeah, I think it's a challenge. There is no easy answer, but we have to manage it. And yeah, education, the right. I mean, it's interesting to see how the major companies like Facebook and Twitter have now starting to develop tools and restraints and putting signs on things when they're inaccurate and so on. They're starting to do that and police it themselves. But it's very much a double-edged sword. I mean, it's a fantastic enabler, and I use it myself professionally and socially. Yeah. I've learned. I've never, and I'm sure you have. I've never used it. I've always count to 10 before I send anything to make sure that you're not the one that's giving a knee-jerk reaction to things. That just think carefully before you write, and not put things on there that you wouldn't be prepared to say to someone's face in a social discourse.
Yeah, that's where it's interesting, isn't it? I think that's actually a really great baseline to start with. If you're not willing to say it to their face, certainly don't put it online for everyone to see.
Yeah. I had to laugh. There was a really good comedy sketch where there was a guy walking around the student campus with a photo album, and he just kept going up to people and say, "Oh, do you want to see my holiday snaps?" And people go, "No, I don't know you. I don't want to see your holiday snaps." And the more he did it, the more you realize that that's just what happens on Facebook, where you're thrusting your holiday snaps in front of people. Like, you just wouldn't do it normally, would you? Like at a bus stop and say, "Oh, do you want to see my holiday snaps?" But we do it on social media.
That is a very good point. True. But mind you, old school, back when there was no social media, everyone would say, "Oh, let's look at the pictures tonight."
Yeah. Or you go to someone's house and they'd get the projector out and you go, "Oh no.
Oh no."
We're going to have 2 hours in front of their projector.
That's right. Get me a glass of wine, please.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, Caroline. Thank you. And what about your last piece, your good news, legacy, or opportunity story?
Yeah. Well, I think I wanted to share that one of my biggest takeaways from my time in Canada, and I have enjoyed it tremendously here. I'm here for another 6 months, so don't say goodbye yet. But one of the most fascinating things I've learned here, gone into, is learning about First Nations and Indigenous culture. And what's fascinating is their respect and responsibility for their environment. When we see people get upset about development around them, and they think, "Oh, well, it's a sort of, you're just being, you're just anti-development." But there's actually, I understand that people feel that it's their responsibility to protect the environment for future generations. In a way, that concept of 7 generations and the concept of being a good ancestor, I hadn't really thought of those things in the way that I understand now from my engagement with that culture in Canada, and it's given me a new perspective. And I see it like in Japan, that sense of more longer term thinking is there. They have the concept of in a planning meeting, in a policy planning meeting and so on, having people role playing future generations and challenging the current ideas. So I think that's really good, because I like the Edward de Bono's 6 colored thinking hats concept. I use that sometimes in meetings to get people to think laterally and come at issues from different angles, whether you're looking at from an innovative point of view, from a sort of risk point of view, and so on. So what I've thought about is a 7th hat for the 7th generation, that every Deberner should have a 7th hat when we think about what does this decision look like in 50 years' time, in 100 years' time for future generations. And I think the world would be a better place if we did more of that.
I agree. What great advice.
Yeah.
Caroline, thank you so much for joining us today. You're such a busy person. I'm grateful for this time and your words of wisdom. Thank you so much.
No, it's a great pleasure. I've enjoyed watching other people, so it's good to have the opportunity to have a go myself. And thank you for doing this.
Oh, no, thank you, Caroline. And thank you for your service over the years. And we wish you all the best in your next journey.
Well, I'll be heading back to London, but I don't know which job I'm going to be doing yet, but I'm sure it'll be something interesting.
So exciting. Well, I look forward to watching you for sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Goodbye for now.
Thank you. And all the best to your family. Everyone, that was Caroline Saunders, and so glad that she was here in Canada and that she took time for us today. Thank you for joining us on Cat's Track, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.